Diplomacy is really critical. You can't say, hey, cut it out or do this now, even though technically you have that authority. You have to do it in a way that respects people, that treats people as professionals, because everybody else has their jobs. You have to really understand their priorities so you can come and meet them where they are to try and get what you need while allowing them to get what they need.
This is the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast, helping filmmakers who share a Christian worldview stay in touch, informed, and inspired. Quiet on set. Rolling. Today's host is Geoffrey Whitt.
Hey there, welcome back to the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast. My name is Jeff, and I'm really happy to have Joth Riggs with me today. We talked to him already in our first episode. We heard a lot about his background and the work he's done. I encourage you to go back and listen to the previous episode if you haven't already done so, and you can find his full bio and learn more about him. But welcome back, Joth.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Good to be back.
We're going to talk more about set logistics today. You've got lots of experience as a first AD, I think a second AD, and as a director. What does all of that look like? What's the relationship between those roles when you're on set? That's what I want to talk about today.
Yeah, sure. So the first AD is ultimately responsible for basically keeping the machine moving and making sure that everything is done smoothly, efficiently, and safely. Those are all sort of the three main priorities. Essentially, we say that the priority of the ADs is to, quote, get it in the can. There's a lot of moving parts, and somebody needs to organize all of that and keep the whole process streamlined. It's very easy to end up with chaos on a set because there's so many moving parts, so many different departments. Every department's got their own responsibility. But they sort of have blinders on sometimes. They're focused on their immediate task and not always how it fits all into the big picture. That's the job of the assistant directors, to make sure that everything is working in harmony. It's the director's responsibility to make sure everything works creatively, and the AD's job to make sure everything works logistically.
So the director is getting the story told.
Absolutely.
And the assistant director is making sure all the parts work so that the director can do his job. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Ideally, the director should be really focused on getting great performances from their actors. That's their priority. Whatever it takes for the director to be able to do that, the assistant director needs to facilitate. So getting the actors ready, making sure that the right actors for the right scene are, ready and in place when the crew is ready, making sure that the crew all knows what are we doing, what are we setting up for, what's happening after this, so they can be preparing for that, and so on. Yeah, it's a big logistical process.
So let's talk for a moment about first AD, second AD, what the differences are, and what each of them might be doing like on a daily basis.
Yeah, so the first AD is really focused on the shot we're doing right now. So whatever the crew is either shooting or setting up for, the AD is prioritizing. Actually, and then I'll go a step further. And then what happens after that, and what does today look like? The second AD is generally working on preparing for the next day's work. So they tend to be a day ahead. They will often work back in a trailer, back in the production office. They are going around to different departments saying, hey, tomorrow we're using this jib. Tomorrow we have this stunt. Are you guys ready for that? Tomorrow, wardrobe, we go into a pool. Are you ready for the costumes to get all wet? And do we have everything we need to get our actors dried off? And so on. So they'll be talking to the different departments throughout the day on what the next day's work is going to entail, to make sure that when the next day comes, the first AD has everything they need to just implement.
Call times, perhaps, that type of thing.
Yeah, well, the first AD it depends on the relationship between the first and the second. The first AD ultimately has the authority, will make the final call. The second AD will often speculate on what they think the first AD is going to want. They have a lot of similar knowledge, obviously, and similar information. So they might say, we have a split, for example, which means we have partial daylight work, partial night work. So they're looking at the script as well. They're looking at the scenes. They know how much work is in each, and they might say, we have roughly half and half. I think we might want to shoot for a noon call, which basically means we'll go till midnight, half daylight, half night work. And then the first AD will assess that and say, yeah, I think noon's perfect, or no, we actually need to come in earlier for this, or what have you. And it's a discussion, and then the second AD applies whatever the first AD wants.
Mm-hmm. What advice would you have for somebody thinking they might want to fill this type of role? What knowledge or experience do you think they should have? What's the best route to get into those roles?
Okay, so two different questions: the route to get in, and what experience do they need to have. I'd say, first of all, the entry level position on any film set, other than a free intern, is a production assistant, sometimes referred to as a set PA. So a set PA works under the assistant directors, so they're part of the AD team, and they help facilitate whatever we need to make it happen. A lot of times that means fanning out to let people know when we're rolling, so that somebody's not, hammering, nearby when we're rolling sound, stopping people from walking into the shot, stuff like that. So they just do a lot of accommodating, facilitating, communicating with people, whatever the AD's instructions are, and so on. So that's a great entry level position. Sometimes other departments have their own PAs as well. Sometimes there might be a camera PA, a wardrobe PA. So, for example, if you're interested in one of the other departments besides the AD department, you might see if there's a PA position in their department, which it's like a runner, a gopher, an anything I can do to help kind of position. So that's the best way to get in if you want to be an AD. And so as a PA, you get to spend a lot of time on set. You get to understand all the different roles on a set, what everybody does, who's responsible for what, and so on. And so that starts to arm you for what it takes to become a second assistant director. There's multiple second assistant directors on a film crew as well. There's a key second assistant director. That's the one we were just talking about, who does the call sheet. And then there's second assistant director. And then beyond that, there may be additional second assistant directors. If you're on a small project, you may only have one. If you're on a Marvel blockbuster, you may have 7 or 8 second ADs with different responsibilities. Some are assigned to different units. You might have a stunt unit. You might have a driving unit, an action unit. And so you may have multiple second ADs. So while you have the second or the key second working on tomorrow's work, as I mentioned, the second tends to be right on set near the first AD, facilitating today's shot, the shot we're setting up right now. So while I'm firsting, for example, I have a second who is helping me set background. Background are what we refer to as the extras on set, the atmosphere. And, if we're in a restaurant scene, all of the other people sitting in the restaurant eating that don't have dialogue would be considered extras. And that has to be set. That's the one creative aspect of the AD's role. Well, maybe not the one, but it is one of the bigger ones. So creatively speaking, the ADs tend to be the ones that set up all of the blocking, all of the movement of all of the non-speaking parts in a scene. If you have one in particular, let's say you've got a character on a sidewalk and somebody goes up and, a street performer, and somebody goes up and throws money in his hat, and he says, thank you very much. And then the guy keeps going. That would be considered a featured extra, because that extra, they still don't have lines, but they are actually called out in the script. They actually have specific action as opposed to just random passerby in the background. So, depending, of course, on how big the project is, will determine how many seconds you need. You may need several. just to work with all of the extras and to set them. So as a PA, your next move would typically be, if you were to move into the AD department, would be as a second AD or additional second AD. When you're working as a second for a little while, you start to understand a bit more about department heads and bigger picture items. Then you kind of move up to key second AD. And then the next step after that would be first AD. So that's the hierarchy.
Very interesting. Now, you've worked in all of those roles. Is that correct?
I have, yeah. There's one other sort of intermediate role that I didn't mention. I did in the last podcast, which is assistant director trainee. There is a training program that the Directors Guild offers that trains people to become assistant directors. There's only a handful of them, maybe a dozen or 24 in the country. And so if you're fortunate to be able to get into that program, then it is a bit of a stepping stone. You'll work for 400 days, which is essentially almost 2 years. As an assistant director trainee, the DGA will assign you to projects, and you'll basically kind of work as a shadow to the second ADs. And then when you finish your 400 days, you become a second AD. So I actually was in that program. I started as a PA, so I was a PA. Well, gosh, I'll go even further. I started as an intern. Before I was ever in a paid position, I worked for free on a set. And then I worked my way up to PA and got, basically minimum wage. And, the great thing again is that it allowed me to really start to understand the inner workings of a set. And then I was fortunate to get accepted into that training program. So I did 400 days as a DGA trainee. Then I moved into the DGA as an assistant director and was a second assistant director, was a second. I was an additional second. So depending on the projects I ended up on, I would either be working with background, I would be working with what we call first team, which is principal actors, getting them ready, getting them through hair and makeup and so on. By the way, I mentioned that the second works on set with the first AD. You may have another second or an additional second running first team back at base camp, getting the actors through hair and makeup every morning, making sure that they know what we're doing, escorting them to and from the set. Oh, I'm sorry. I actually didn't answer the second part of your question. The first one was how to get there. The second was what are the skills necessary? That's an important one. And that's something that I learned in the training program, that first of all, you have to have an absolute can-do attitude. You really need that to be in the film industry at all. It's going to require a lot of effort on your part, a lot of energy. And, it's not a 9 to 5, sit at a desk, punch a clock kind of job. It's a kind of job where you do whatever it takes to get the job done. And so if you're not, ready and willing and able to do whatever it takes, you're not going to last very long. All right. You've really got to be ready to jump in and help out and do whatever. So that can-do attitude is high priority. The second thing that's really important in particular for the ADs is diplomacy. The ADs are the management department. So therefore we have authority, right? We can essentially tell the crew what to do. However, we also have to answer to the higher ups. We have to answer to the studio, the producers, and then our principal actors, especially our lead actors, they carry a lot of weight on a project. There's not an authority scenario with that, but you don't want to ruffle feathers of your actors. That causes a lot of problems. So you have to be able to tell people what to do without people feeling like they're being told what to do. It's a really fine line. And so diplomacy is really critical. You can't say, hey, cut it out or do this now, even though technically you have that authority. You ruffle feathers and you're gone. You have to do it in a way that respects people, that treats people as professionals, because everybody else has their jobs. You have to really understand their priorities so you can come and meet them where they are to try and get what you need while allowing them to get what they need. Because there's a lot of friction on a film set because every department works for their department head. They don't work for you, so to speak. And so, for example, if you work in the camera department as an assistant camera, the DP is usually the person who's going to be hiring or allowing you to be hired on their team. ADs don't hire camera team. So even though the AD has the authority to say, hey, you need to be doing this or that, they want to please their boss, which is going to be the DP. And if the DP had them doing something different, you've got conflict. So you have to understand the hierarchy, what their priorities are, and again, what yours are and how you can meet them.
Right.
So diplomacy is key.
Yeah. I mean, some of what you're saying works, of course, and is important in all areas of life, and especially in leadership. So I think very much what you're talking about is leadership type roles.
Yeah, management.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And doing it well is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people on film sets that don't understand good management skills. And there's reputations out there of some ADs that are screamers or, just don't treat people right. They make the rest of us look bad, and it's unfortunate. But the good ones are calm and understanding and communicative. And those are all things that are going to make you a really strong AD and team player, and you're going to work a lot more often.
When we put together the meetups, we wanted to be very strategic with the approach, thinking about the obstacles. Where are those things that would actually make the greatest impact?
I just wanted to say thank you, Jacqueline. You guys having everything so organized. I went on the website last week. I was able to sign up. All the instructions worked. Everything was seamless. And I have not had an experience where it's been this seamless ever. Also, I've already met some amazing people on this. And I love the format. You teach us a little bit, and then we go into a separate group, which is a few people. It takes away some of the anxiety if anybody has anxiety about speaking in a large group. And also, I've gotten to really know people beyond just that's your name and your face. And some people I knew already, which is also great because there's so many people here from the industry that just have amazing experience in all areas. I've met writers, I've met actors, I've met producers. Today, I was with somebody in a room who actually does editing, and that was such a great perspective.
Join us on Thursday mornings for our FAF Association meetings. We've got networking opportunities, masterminds, and more. Find the schedule on our homepage at faffassociation.com or find the link in our show notes.
Yeah, it also sounds to me like one of the things as you're starting out and maybe working your way up, one of the things that you're doing is learning the different parts and the different departments of what's going on a set. And the more you know everyone else's roles, while you may not know how to actually fulfill the role yourself, having an understanding of them is really going to help you do your job.
Yeah, you really need to put yourself in their shoes, because here's the unfortunate thing about the film industry. It's an entire world of freelancers. Nobody has job security. We work on that project, and when that project's over, every last one of us is unemployed. So when you're talking to a special effects guy who's setting up his pyrotechnics or whatever, you needed to move quicker or you need him to do it somewhere else, remember that that person's priority is making sure that that pyrotechnic goes off exactly as planned and that it's perfect, because that's how he gets his next job. And so anything you do to curb that is going to be met with resistance, right? So the crew is not always going to cooperate if you aren't, again, coming alongside them. Now, if you have the understanding that, okay, what this person requires, let's say it's a prop person and they're building a prop or something. Okay, I know that the producers or the director has been coming down hard on them to make sure that this is done on time or that it looks a certain way. And, they need to use the drill and we're shooting and you need them to be quiet. So it's rather than just say, hey, cut it out, you need to stop right now. You need to say, hey, can you go do that over there? Or how much more time do you need? Maybe we can stall. I mean, maybe it's like, well, I only need 2 more minutes and then I'm done. Okay, you know what? we might be able to afford to take 2 minutes. And okay, well then I'm going to let the gaffer tweak the light that he was just talking about. So finish up, but so it's communication and it's understanding what that person needs, understanding that the gaffer has requested he needs a minute, and again, it's this big dance. All right. But the big thing is that you have to understand what people require, and then you have to really be diplomatic and respectful of their needs.
Mm-hmm. Well, Joth, you've given us a really good perspective on logistics and the roles on set, especially with regards to assistant directors and the various roles that come under that. Now, your experience, of course, goes into directing as well, which is different, again, from any of those roles. What I would like you to do is take a few moments and tell us about your course, because you've got a very extensive course. It's called Directing Your Movie. It's available on our website. For those who are listening, you can go to fafassociation.com and find it under online courses. But tell us about that course right now, please.
Yeah, well, first of all, I started as a director early on with short films, and then I moved into assistant directing because I had opportunities. I really enjoyed it, and then it kind of stuck for a while. And then later, in recent years, I've gone back to directing again. I still assistant direct as well. I like both. But because I've done so much assistant directing, which is essentially the right-hand man of the director, I have worked with so many directors. I have seen so many directors in action, some who are amazing and some who are terrible. And I've been able to learn so much from watching them and experiencing what they're going through. And it's ironic because I often say, because I've worked with some of the best directors in the business, I learn way more from the terrible ones, because the best directors make it look so easy. It's almost like sleight of hand, Wow, how did they do that? That was amazing. They said one thing and got exactly what they needed. And so it's a little harder to discern. But the bad directors, it's super easy to see what doesn't work, Whoa, okay. When you approach somebody like that, you don't get what you're looking for, or your miscommunication is really causing a problem with the crew and so on. So I knew that I knew I had a lot to offer. And so I thought, I want to put something together from a logistics standpoint on directing, because so often a lot of what you read or watch on directing is about the creative side, which is super important. But a lot of people don't really talk about the nuts and bolts of directing. What is required from a director? What do you do when you first get on set? What's the first thing a director does? A lot of people, they don't talk about things like that. What's the second thing you do? It's just not the sort of thing you generally talk about. And so I talk about the specifics of the day-to-day, what that looks like in pre-production, when you're in development, developing the story, the script, casting, scouting, and then what that looks like when you're actually shooting, when you're on set during production. What's the day-to-day look like? And then post-production. It's a long process. There's a lot to it. And my course goes step by step. I think there's 64 segments covering each one from A to Z all the way through.
Mm-hmm. Sounds very extensive.
Very thorough.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, you can find that course under online courses on our website, fafassociation.com. How might they best know whether it's suited for them?
Well, there's a trailer for the course, and I believe you have that on your site as well. It's just a brief, it's a 2 or 3 minute trailer where I basically kind of give you a snippet into a moment on a film set where I talk about all of the different roles. And it's the kind of thing that either really excites you or completely bores you. And I think that's one way to know whether or not film is for you. If that trailer sounds super exciting, then this is definitely the thing for you. And I think you'll get a lot out of that course.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about Whitestone Entertainment, your production company, and what you've been working on or what's coming up.
It's initially way back when I came out of film school and started doing short films. It was Whitestone Productions. as I got more involved in the film industry, and I realized that what really sets great films apart is whether or not they're entertaining. And I thought, you know what? It's not just enough to actually make a movie. You got to make it great. You got to make it entertaining. And that's when I changed the company name to Whitestone Entertainment. Whitestone, which by the way comes from Revelations 2:17, where Jesus says, "I give you each a white stone." He's making reference to, in their days of hearing court trials, jurors would be given a white and a black stone. And at the end of the testimonies, they would put a white or a black stone in a pouch to determine guilty or not guilty. And I always loved that, knowing Jesus says in Revelations, "I give you each a not guilty verdict, a white stone." So that's where the name of my company comes from. And Whitestone is essentially, those are projects that originate with me. So right now we have a feature film in development, an action thriller. Actually, we're in pre-production. We're casting as we speak. It's an action thriller that myself and my writing partner, Matthew Eason, wrote. And we are hoping to shoot it later this year in New Mexico.
Cool. So you still work on projects for other production companies. You get hired as a director, hired as a first AD or second AD, but your own projects are done through Whitestone Entertainment.
Yeah, that's correct. So I do direct for other people. Those would not be considered a Whitestone. Whitestone is a project that comes from me. Yeah.
We'll get links in the show notes for your production company, and also tell us where people can find you if they want to learn more.
Sure. Well, my production company website is whitestoneentertainment.com. And I'm on social media. I'm mostly on Facebook. I post a lot of behind the scenes photos from a lot of the sets that I work on there. I'm also on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, but you'll get the most out of the experience if you followed me on Facebook.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate your input today. I think for me, it's been a unique interview in that we haven't really covered this type of stuff before. And, to have somebody walk through the logistics of set and the roles on set, I think is very valuable for those who aren't so familiar.
Well, but that's one thing I wanted to mention, by the way, is a lot of people, when they think they want to go into film, they all think they want to be the director or the producer, and don't realize that there's probably 150 different things you can do on a film set. And so many more opportunities. I mean, there's only one director on any given movie, but you might have 8 grips. So, that's a great way to get involved in production. And the other thing is, of course, if you're directing and you're new, you're by nature, right, you're going to be working with a pretty inexperienced team. And so you're not really going to learn a whole lot about how the greats do it. But if you get yourself on a professional film set with bigger, more experienced people in a smaller role, then you can learn. And so get yourself onto a film set as a set costumer, as a grip or an electrician or a props person or DIT or script supervisor or special effects or stunts. I could go on and on. There's so many different assets on a film set, and not everybody needs to be the director or the producer.
Yeah, and if your goal is to become a director, you can learn a lot along the way.
Well, the other thing is that you really need the respect of the crew, because you're at the helm. And if you have no clue what it is they do, it's going to be very difficult to get that. So the most respected directors are the ones that have a sense of what it is their crew is doing and why, and how they can help. And that just goes a long way toward having a really harmonious work environment, which also means that it's much easier for the director to get what they want. Because there's 2 kinds of sets. There's sets of harmony and sets of chaos. And there can be a lot of antagonism if you have a director who's clueless or doesn't treat the crew right or with respect. Then there's going to be a lot of friction, and it's not going to be a pleasant experience, and the director's not going to get what they want. Mm-hmm. When they treat their crew with respect, it's a lot easier to get amazing stuff, because then the crew is willing to go above and beyond, or to give it their all, to make sure that they're giving the director their best. And that's ultimately what you would want as a filmmaker.
Mm-hmm. Great advice, Joth. Thank you so much for sharing today. It's been great having you. A lot of deep stuff here, and I think a lot of value for our listeners, so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking your time and sharing.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. I enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
Take care, and I remind everyone, take a look for Directing Your Movie. Just go to fafassociation.com and online courses.
Thanks for listening to the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast. If you've been enjoying this podcast, take a moment to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast player so you don't miss an episode. And if you'd like to support the production of this podcast, you can leave a tip at faffpodcast.com/support. Bringing filmmakers together for faith and family.